my name is Sally Morris, and I am married to Tim Morris. We have two biological children who are 29 and 26. And then we have an adopted child who is now 17.
She said, I'm Tim Morris, and our adopted child, we actually met before we adopted in Ethiopia. He was in an orphanage over there. He has some physical disabilities. He has paralysis and spasticity in his legs and arms, and even up into his speech a little bit. And he was in a bad spot over there, so it took a couple years, but we adopted him and brought him back here to Colorado. We weren't really understanding of some of his behavioral issues until he started living with us.
Okay. And then as time went on, he showed some really bizarre behavior. When he didn't get his way, he would fall on the floor and crawl. He was not able to walk without help of crutches or a walker, but he just had some really bizarre behaviors.
But Sammy's bizarre behavior would happen outside of our nuclear family as well. People would see it. His teachers would see it in school. And Sammy could do something like if you asked him to put his napkin on his lap, and he didn't like that command, then he would put his head down, wouldn't talk, and wouldn't eat for 10 or 20 hours, literally. Or if he asked him to turn off the television, he could fall on the floor and then maybe crawl to his room and crawl under his bed and stay there for many, many hours and not eat or talk or anything like that. So, pretty crazy kind of behavior.
And he did do this at school a little bit when he didn't want to do what he was asked to do by the teachers. He would put his head down on the table, and they couldn't do anything about it. He was in special ed. We got him into school about 3 days after he came, and they were wonderful to him, and he loved the social aspect of it. But he still didn't have this proper behavior of how to act in a school setting, and when he didn't get his way, he would then have these bizarre behaviors. Maladaptive behaviors, we came to learn that term.
For him, he couldn't. I think sometimes it was behaviorally, like he would just shut down. He'd go into his brainstem, and so you couldn't speak logically. You couldn't say, "Okay, it's cold outside. You have to wear a jacket. If you don't wear a jacket, you'll freeze to death." We live in Summit County. It's 5 below 0 tonight when we're going outside, and he couldn't. And some of it was behavior, but sometimes I think it was just he couldn't follow you logically. He couldn't understand. So if you tried to have a logical conversation with him and explain, this would be the cause and effect, this would be the result of your behavior, he wouldn't understand that. And so, but that's of course the way we parented our first two children. You say you go outside without a coat, you'll freeze to death. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense, I'll put a coat on, I don't want to freeze to death. Whereas that kind of parenting didn't work so well with Sammy. So
we didn't have a with our own kids, there could be, with our biological kids, there could be, there were consequences, and consequences that were important to them. You could take things away. You could say, you're not driving for a week when you talk that way to me. I'm taking the keys. We had enough of a relationship from the early years that there's so much trust that we could get away with that with them. With Sammy, we didn't have that relationship. We didn't have that trust built yet. So that is there was no consequence that mattered enough to him. And another behavior that he would have that Tim just mentioned was there were times that it was more important for him to win than for him to breathe, right, or for him not to freeze to death. There was a time where he was angry at me. It was 5 below 0, and I won't go into the story, but the bottom line is he fell down on the ground and would not get up, would not go inside. was not wearing a coat, refused to have a coat, and it was 5 below 0, and he would have frozen to death over obeying me to get up and to get on his crutches and walk inside. So
another example of kids I think like him. Consequences don't work was when one of the early months when he did something wrong, and so I took something away from him, as a form of punishment. And he went into his room, and he got every single thing that we had ever given him. He put them all into a big basket, and he drug them out into the living room and gave them back to us. So in other words, he was like, "Okay, you can't take anything away from me now
because nothing matters to me."
because I don't have anything."
That happened many, many times actually. He'd get mad and it would come out.
Big thing is he wanted to be in charge, and as Sally mentioned, he didn't trust us. And I think the trust is so key. Our older kids, they trusted us, and they knew that we were wanting what was best for them. They knew that we were going to take care of them, protect them, and Sammy didn't have that, and so he didn't have that trust. But it built up over the years, which is wonderful. But I remember again in the early months when we were trying to explain that I'm your father, this is your mother, we're here for you. And he had very little English at the time because he'd just come to America and only had a few English words. And so, trying to put this really simply, I said, "Okay, Sammy, a bear comes in the door, Dad fights the bear. He fights the bear for you." And Sammy says, "No, I fight the bear." So he's in for himself.